Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Fisher, and I'm the Executive Director of Erie Arts and Culture. I want to thank you for joining us this evening for our Pro Network webinar with Dustin Harewood, titled Content, Craft, and Purpose. Typically, I'm joining you from the comfort of my home when we host these events, but this evening I'm actually down at the campus of Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, hence me wearing the mask. I'm also not operating on my own computer this evening, so if I have any technical difficulties, I'll blame it on that. The Pro Network is funded in part graciously by the National Endowments for the Arts. Erie Arts and Culture believes that artists and cultural professionals in our community can make a tremendous impact in the development of our region when they are provided with access to professional development, resources, and opportunities. And we aim to do that through our Pro Network series. As I mentioned this evening, we are joined by Dustin Harewood, who I have the privilege and pleasure of calling a friend from my time in Jacksonville. Dustin was born and grew up in New York City in the 1980s and became a junior member of the Brooklyn Museum at 7 years old. His family later moved back to Barbados, where he attended high school. After that, he moved to the US to attend North Carolina Central University, where he received his BA, and then the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he received his MFA. Dustin has been twice recognized with a Distinguished Faculty Award from Florida State College at Jacksonville. In 2017, the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville awarded him with the prize of Arts Educator of the Year. Marriage and children with a Japanese woman seriously affected Dustin's studio practice. The content of his work and life is reflected in his projects between three specific locations: Jacksonville, Florida, Christchurch, Barbados, and you're going to have to correct me on this one, Dustin, Aomori, Japan?
Aomori, yes. Aomori, yes.
So we do ask that everybody please stay muted this evening if they're not speaking, just to cut back on feedback. We have 20 participants in here right now, and if everybody's unmuted, it can get a little bit noisy. But if you have a question during Dustin's presentation, if you can please type that into the chat function. I will be unmuting and asking Dustin questions as they pop up. The session will include a Q&A at the end. And if you're more comfortable, you're welcome to hang on to your question and unmute at the end during the Q&A session and ask it directly to Dustin. We are recording this evening's session, which will be posted to YouTube afterwards. So it exists as a resource for artists that aren't able to make it this evening. We are also streaming on Facebook right now, so please be mindful of that. And without any further hesitation, I now hand it over to Dustin Harewood. Dustin, thanks for joining us. You're muted, Dustin.
Off to a fantastic start here. Thank you for inviting me, Patrick. I just want to say, guys, that is really strange when you have to sit and listen to someone talk about you and try to figure out what kind of face to make while they're talking about you. That was good. So when Patrick asked me to come and do this talk, I will admit that starting out, I felt kind of overwhelmed by content when we came up with the title. I just started thinking of how many different directions could we go with this. And I started thinking of all these different genres of art, started thinking about art history, started thinking about all these different art ecosystems, all these different types of artists, craft, fine art versus craft, industrial art. Where does this all fit in? And it was kind of overwhelming. And so I've been thinking long and hard about, like, where do we start? We're all living in the United States, so we're all kind of seeing things, I would assume, I have to assume, from kind of a Western point of view. And we probably most likely have been educated in like a Western timeline. So that would be our frame of reference. Tonight, I want to kind of have some discussions with you all about this idea of fine art, this idea of craft, once upon a time, if we're talking about this timeline, if we were to think back to the Renaissance, there was a time when we weren't separating them, right? Like this idea of great artists simultaneously being recognized as great artisans, having workshops, having apprentices that they were training with very, very specific skill sets to do carving or painting or whatnot. People training under masters and then going on ahead and then going out on their own and then getting their own setup happening. So we have those kinds of models. But then you have different kinds of models, don't we? Because these days we have the romance of the single artists not working in a workshop or under a master, say, but someone like a Van Gogh who's off on his own, kind of making work with no one kind of there asking for work, no one kind of patronizing him, making stuff, dying relatively alone. But then we shift again to people like Da Vinci or Michelangelo, these like huge names who were very much celebrated and plugged into many patrons, right? With big, vast projects. So there's just so much to cover, so much to talk about. When it comes to the visual arts, though, for us now, I would say that we probably have 4 main categories of visual arts for us that we're dealing with now, right? One of them would be functional. So we're talking about, and we're talking like design wise too, we're talking about cars, right? We're talking about houses, clothing, a lot of fashion sort of thing, technology sort of stuff. Do we separate that from art? I don't know. We have non-functional, which is dealing with fine art stuff, right? Which I think most of the people on here tonight are kind of in that realm. Yes, more in the fine arts. And it's funny when I say non-functional, right? Because that's that thing that people, we are inspiring people to own these things, but a painting in a house may not be as necessary as the door that prevents people from walking into the house, right? We have non-functional work, but then we also have environmental design, environmental art, and then we have graphic arts, which is a whole other kettle of fish, right? Because when you guys walk into a Target or a Walmart supermarket, then there's a ton of art, but then that's a whole other category unto itself. Tonight, I'm assuming that we're mostly going to be dealing with non-functional art. We're talking about fine art, yes? So let's go on ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over here now and share my screen and go through a few images. Let's see here. Okay, I'm here. Let's play this thing from the start. So content, craft, and purpose. So I was just talking about all of that stuff, and I think you can understand why I was feeling a bit overwhelmed as far as like, where are we going with this? So I figured I'd boil everything down to some very basic questions, 3 basic questions that I would have for all of you. So who are you? What do you do? And that last question, which is a really important question, is why? Why do you do what you do? I'm gonna read through. So there are other things that we do as artists. There are these 4 major things. Another 4 things. When I'm going through these 4, I want you to think about artists or types of art that you think would fit in these different genres here. One of them would be refreshing our vision to help us see the world in new ways. And what does that sort of art look like? Right, refreshing our vision to help see the world in new ways. Who do you think about as an artist when you think of that? Another one would be creating extraordinary versions of ordinary objects. What artists do you know that probably would fit what kind of artwork would fit that? Making extraordinary versions of ordinary objects. Yeah. Then we have the idea of the artist as being the person who would record history and commemorate. I think that might be an easier one, yeah, for us, yeah? Can we think of famous paintings, or can we think of artists who chiefly were dealing with this idea of recording and commemorating? A lot of historical paintings, right, that we can think about now, yeah? And the last one I would say would be giving tangible form to the unknown. Giving tangible form to the unknown. So those are those four major things. For everyone who's on here, I'm assuming most of you all are artists. I want you to think about which of those four, do you fall under any of those banners? If so, which one? I don't know. And we'll get back to that there shortly. So who are you? What do you do? And why? So let's look at another image here. So I want to bring in this guy into this conversation here because I teach painting. I've been teaching painting for the past 10 years. And what's fascinating is this guy's name always seems to come up in class. So we have all these different ecosystems of art. Yeah. We go to the museum to look at work. We go to, I would say what, upscale galleries. We might go to commercial galleries, right, that are more interior design based. Yes. We may be showing work or making work for art festivals, different genre. What genre do you feel like you fit in is my question. And toward the end, this is a conversation I'd like to have with a lot of you. So I'd like for a lot of you to chime in and let me know where you feel like you fit in this whole scheme. I think is really important as artists starting out. It's never really that clear. It's not like someone appears in front of us and asks us, what category do you feel like you fit in? What is it that you want? Do you want work that is meant for a museum? Do you want to make work that is meant for textbooks in school? Do you want to make work that is easy for you to be able to collaborate with interior designers? Are these sorts of, I'm thinking of painting, I'm thinking of paintings being made in all these different, for all these different reasons, in all these different spheres. What is it that you want? How do you see yourself? What is your ideal career? We don't all want the same thing, right? So that's the big question here. What is it that you want? And then when we decide what it is that we want, then the question is, are we doing the things that we should be doing if we're pursuing that particular lane? Now, I pulled Bob's image up here because I feel like if I were to think about an artist like, say, Pablo Picasso, I would say that he's probably very controversial. There are people who love his work. There are people who hate his work. His work has been, well, Pablo, we talk about someone like Warhol, these two giants who own the first part of the 19th century, second part of the 19th century. People totally get it, totally into it. Some people just don't get it at all. I feel like this guy, Bob, here on the screen is someone who people with no art background, maybe never been to a gallery or museum or opening, never made a painting for some strange reason. PBS seems like the average person is able to connect with this guy. Yeah. I don't think that we would ever find a Bob Ross painting at the Guggenheim or the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, right? No matter how popular he has been. But then I guess that would come to what he's making and who he's making it for, and the intent, right? The content and the intent of his landscapes, yes? So, but here's the thing. Is this a lane that most of us on this call would want to pursue? And if so, there's nothing at all wrong with this, yeah? So let me move off from him for a second. and we're talking about types of work and where all this stuff kind of fits. Let me see here. So it's interesting, I've been talking about this idea of paintings, us making non-functional pieces of work, yes? But then again, we're talking about non-functional work, but we're talking about this idea of that Western context again, aren't we? Because if we're moving into different civilizations, we're talking about this idea of makers making things, but they're making things for specific purposes. So I guess if we were to look at these masks, if we were to look at a lot of ceremonial masks, now we can go into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, we can go into a lot of museums and see masks like this, go to the Tate Modern in England, and they would be filled with, they have whole sections of stuff like this, but removed from its context, yes? So not used in ceremonies or anything like that anymore, but rather sitting there in a glass case with a light on it, right? So that we can walk up and just look at the piece of work itself, not the piece of work necessarily being worn by someone who's doing a dance for a wedding ceremony or for a funeral, huh? So it's fascinating looking at work in this way, in this context. And then the question is again, is there anyone here tonight who feels like that they're making work that might be used in a more ceremonial context? I don't know. Let's take a look at something else here. That looks very familiar, right? We've all seen imagery like this, yes? Pretty famous imagery. So if we're talking about the Western timeline, so we're talking about all of that Renaissance stuff, but we know that was based off of Greek and Roman stuff. And we know that the Greek and Roman stuff was based off of a lot of this North African stuff, yes? But what is going on here? So you remember I talked about the different types of art, the different genres. Where does this fall, folks? The sculptors making these massive pieces, were they trying to refresh a vision to help see the world in new ways? I don't know, right? Were they creating extraordinary versions of ordinary things? Maybe, I guess we could say that, huh? Because I don't know, a regular person's not 50, 60 feet tall. But then again, these sculptures aren't supposed to be of regular people, are they? Yeah? Or definitely would this fall under the banner of recording and commemorating? I think that may be the space that we're in, yes? And then there's that last one again, giving tangible form to the unknown. And that's an interesting one there, because I think with some of these figures, they would be actual emperors, yes? But then there's some other sculptures in there that would probably be more gods, yes? Like we may have Horus in here. There may be some other gods there. And then if that's the case, then we're talking about this idea of giving tangible form to the unknown being combined with this idea of recording and commemorating, huh? So we have that, yes? So let me take that and let me fast forward and let's talk about us right now. Let's talk about a very new piece of sculpture. So every year I would like to take my kids from Florida over to DC and we would go through the Smithsonian's. That's just kind of a thing that we would do and look at monuments. So we've been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years. Unfortunately, I don't think it's happening this year. But again, so we're looking here at, again, this idea of sculpture kind of, again, capturing, we talked about those categories. We looked at that Egyptian work at that monumental scale. And here we have someone in a modern context that we have recorded and commemorated in this extraordinary kind of way. Yes, another genre of work. So here we go. And I ask you again, and this is something I would like to talk to you all about, because it's a shame that we're not all in the same room so that we can all have this active conversation. But then the questions are, again, that I'm going to pose to you. As artists, what story are you trying to tell? So another question that's underneath this is an even more important question after that. what story are you trying to tell is who would you think is interested in the story that you are trying to tell? Are you aware of your audience? You know, being aware of our audience or thinking that we're aware of our audience as artists sometimes can be, that can kind of trip us up, can't it? Yeah, because sometimes if we're thinking too hard about the audience, sometimes we can lose ourselves. And the question becomes, are we making stuff that we want to make for us, or are we making things specifically to target and sell to people? That's another conversation I'd like to have with you guys tonight, because I'm sure we're all over the board with this. So what story are you trying to tell? Why or who would be interested in this story? And this last thing you see up here on the screen, which would be another thing, is how do you do what you do? And we're talking about this idea now about, so we have context, right? We have this idea of audience, but then we have this idea of materials and process. Now we're talking about materials and process, who your audience is. Can you guys think again about Bob? Let's talk about Bob Ross again there. What story is he trying, what was he trying to tell? Who are the people that were interested? And then I think what made him so popular, why so many people gravitate to him with no background in art at all, is because the process is right there in front of all of our faces, isn't it? So a kid or an adult can sit there and watch him go from zero and then create this thing out of nothing within what, 25 minutes? Yeah. And I guess that's the magic there, huh? I'll tell you one thing, guys. I hate making art while people are watching. That's like the worst for me. I'm not a performance artist. I'm like, I don't know, many of you, I've never been interested in acting or dance. That's not my thing. I do a lot of painting and drawing, which usually involves me isolated somewhere by myself. And then the performance is the piece of work on the wall, right? It's not me like I'm having to do here. Thanks a lot, Patrick, being on this camera and talking to all of you, right? That's not my comfort zone. But anyway, but materials and process. So let's go on to something else here. So let me go through these very quickly here, because the bigger part of this thing is going to be the conversation I'd like to have with you all after all of this. So I pulled up the master, the monster himself, Pablo Picasso. And I thought this was a cool picture to show. I didn't want to have a slideshow with like 30, 40 works where I'm trying to figure out how to walk through all of his stuff. Look at this timeline here. Look at this stuff here. What I got, 4 images. And what's so fascinating about this guy would be that image on the far left of the young boy here holding this pole. That's the piece that he did when he was about 16 or 17. Crazy, right? And then we kind of walk our way through here. And then if we look at the piece on the far right, that's the sort of work that made him, well, not just the far right, but let's say those last 2 on the right-hand side of our screen. That's the work that made him famous. Not the piece over there on the far left, but the pieces over there on the far right. Why is he so famous? Why is he so impactful? I guess we have to talk all those things we were discussing just now and the impact that he would have made beyond just the paintings on the wall. There's the other guy, there's the other art giant who kind of would have taken over after him. Do we love him? Do we hate him? I think I always loved reading about him. I've always loved listening to the concepts behind his work. If I were to own a piece of artwork, if I had a chance to go through a museum and pluck something out to own, I don't think a Warhol would be a piece that I would be excited about owning. Though I think I would be still a big fan of him and his thought process. We can revisit that and talk about that later. What are we talking about? What was he famous for? Maybe refreshing our vision to help us see the world in new ways. Or I would definitely say this idea of creating extraordinary versions of ordinary objects, I would probably say. Could we say recording and commemorating? I guess if we were to think about the Marilyns We're to think about the Jackies. We're thinking about the portraits of the celebrities of his day and time. I don't know. So if we were to go on this fancy timeline, this museum timeline, then here we have a chart here by John Zeinzer, 2011 chart. Check out this chart, guys. So if we were to go to MoMA, if we were going to go to the Guggenheim, we we're going to go to the Whitney, yeah, and we we're going to look at a lot of really fancy conceptual fine art. Then take a look at these names here. Take a look at these timelines. I'm going to the left here. We got Cezanne, modern European here. We got Cezanne influencing Picasso and Matisse. We got Cubism, all that good stuff. Then we have Pollock de Kooning. We have the shift from Paris being the center of the art world to New York City being the center of the art world right here in 1945. Your American heroes, Pollock, de Kooning, Krasner, all those people, yes. We still, I would say, New York would still be the center of the art world right now. We'll see after COVID and all this online stuff where it goes from here, right? And if we look at Pollock and de Kooning, take a look at that tree. So we have pop, and then I had Warhol there, right? We have minimalism, yes. We have, I guess we have, well, I see Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg are on their own over there on the right, because I guess they're kind of part of what Pollock and de Kooning are doing, but then they're kind of dipping their toes in some of that pop art, dipping their toes in it as well. So you see we have Warhol, and then look at that last group. I don't know, are we familiar with all these people in this group here? Especially Kondo right now, I say would be a darling of the art market. He's still alive. We know that Basquiat would be what, as of recently, the most expensive painting from a US based artist, American artist, would have been one of his, what, 90 something million, over 100 million plus tax. Yeah. Look at on the right hand side here, version 2. He includes Marcel Duchamp. And we know our guy here famous for that bicycle wheel attached to the attached to that stool, huh? The famous urinal, the ready-made work, right? The work that involves found objects. The anarchist who is Marcel Duchamp. But look at his influence here, because if we were to look at Johns or Rauschenberg or some of these other guys, then Duchamp would definitely be their influence. And then they would explain Warhol. And then Warhol then again spills into these other guys here in the end. I would say Kondo as a painter, but look at Jeff Koons is probably, I guess, arguably, if we're talking about the art market, considered the most successful artist of the moment, if we were going to be tallying up numbers. All right, let's move off from that. And what I want to do here now is not to run on too long, because I would like to talk to you all and kind of revisit a lot of this stuff that I was just going over. Me personally, I would say my work, it would be based upon these 3 locations here. So yes, I am married to a woman who is from North Japan, Aomori, which would be at the top of the main island. I'm currently located and working in Florida, where we're raising 2 of our children. And what's so fascinating about the children is they will spend one summer in Japan, and then they would spend the following summer in Barbados, which is on the left-hand side. Do we know where Barbados is? I know you all know Jamaica. Do we know Barbados? Where rum was invented? Rihanna, yes. All right. So there, where my mother and most of my other family still live. So for me personally as an artist, I would say a lot of my content comes from this idea of these 3 spaces. And then the question would be, I'm going to turn this over to you guys really quickly, and I figured I would throw in one piece here of mine for those of you who don't know who I am. Then, so like this piece here right now, I can't remember, I think I might have called it the whole entire ecosystem. This is a piece right now that is on display at the Cummer Museum here in Jacksonville. It'll be on display till, I think, mid-March. And this would be an example. I think this is what, about 5 feet long. It's a lot of collage of newspapers that I would have brought back from Japan on every trip I would have taken, torn up maps of Florida, from North Florida to the Everglades to Miami area in South Florida. And then also all these reefs, kind of this, you've got an environmental slant here with the reefs in Barbados, a lot of which are endangered right now. And I would say that this work that I do is very much, I guess we could call it environmental art, an idea about us as human beings and kind of like our altering of the environment. But also I would say that this work also is really inspired by my children and the fact that they are half Japanese, half Barbadian, but at the same time growing up in an American context. Yeah, and I keep the thing about myself really short here because let me go on ahead and back up here again through all of this. And this is mostly, let's see here. Yeah, this is mostly the work that the imagery that I had compiled to talk with you all about this evening. Patrick, with that said, I can keep this stuff on screen or I can come off screen and just kind of talk to our audience directly. Let me know what you think might be best, because I would love to hear some of your ideas about the things that I've been talking about so far for this past half hour. And yeah, who you all are as artists and how you feel about some of this stuff that I brought up.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and stop sharing your screen? That way it'll go back into the tile mode and whoever's speaking will pop up. And then if you want to ask any questions to the group, and if anybody in the group specifically wants to answer, feel free to unmute yourself and answer. So Dustin, do you want to begin by asking a question to the group, or do you want members of the audience to present questions to you?
Right, so we went over a lot of stuff just now. What I love the most is, does anyone have a problem with any of the stuff I was talking about just now, as far as this idea, this like my skipping through art history and talking about these different genres? And then I had this question I had posed to you all, which would have been like, who are you and what do you make and why do you make it? These are some big questions I have for you. And the thing I was most excited about when Patrick asked me to come on here and talk to you all was not to spend this whole hour blabbing on about myself or my views on art history, but rather, who are you all and what are you making? And then kind of how do you feel? What are the things that you feel like you're challenged with right now as artists? Are there some things that you feel frustrated with? Do you have issues with identifying your place in this whole world, the scheme? Are you aware of who your audience is? Do you want to share some of that? Are you at odds with who you feel like your artist is, who would be interested in your work? These are the sorts of things that I was going over that I'd be curious to speak with you all about, if any of you all would like to share. Yeah.
Dustin, we do have a question that was typed into the chat function.
Yes.
Which says, do you think that targeting audience in a more consumer commercial context takes away from someone's artistic integrity? And that was asked by Grace.
Oh, Grace. Well, that was a heavy one. I love it. Okay. Grace, so your question is basically, if you know you're making work and your primary driving force for making the work is to sell? That's the question, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, Grace. And your question is kind of, so Grace, let's talk here. I'm glad you unmuted yourself. How do you feel, is this how you make work mostly?
No, but as an art student, like kind of just starting out, it's kind of something I struggle with a lot, is like finding a balance.
Finding a balance. I see. So the struggle is what, Grace? Like kind of thinking
Like kind
about
of like I want to live, but also I want to make art that I love.
Ah, okay. Fantastic question, because Grace, I think that is the $1 million question that all of us as artists constantly trying to work out for ourselves, huh? So here's the thing. Ideally, when we talk about this idea of our artist signature, yeah, let's take a step back here for a minute and let's talk about these ugly terms. If we're talking about the purity of fine arts and whatever else, we're talking about this idea of marketing. We're talking about this idea of a branding. Yes, in this commercial sense. Let me make a statement here right now. You all are very talented. This world is filled with talented people who make really nice things. Okay, we got that. Now, so what? There's a ton of stuff out here in the world, right? There's a whole lot of noise, especially with the internet now. There's so much that we're looking at. Your responsibility, Grace, if you want to do exactly what it is you want to do, and you don't want to have to make things that you think are just going to sell, then the thing is, Grace, the challenge I have for you is, your challenge is not only to be creative about the things that you're making, but the challenge is, how do you be creative about making people care about what you're making? That's the big question that I would then throw back in your direction. You got me? Because the thing is, you don't have the right to ask anyone to buy your work unless you have supplied them with some sort of motive for buying your work. Does that make sense? Yeah. So,
yes, thank you.
Right. Okay. And you could stay on here. You don't have to unmute yourself. You don't have to mute yourself again here. So Grace, right. The question is, how do we make people care about the things that you care about? And that's the big thing. I find, Grace, that artists can be very, very, very creative when it comes to making their work. And then artists can be very, very, very uncreative when it comes to that question about how do you make other people interested in your work. That's where a lot of artists get really lame. And I was included, because for a lot of years, that's something that I struggled with myself. And then I think the breakthrough came for me personally, Grace, where the show where I sold the most stuff, Grace, was a show when I think I stopped making work that I thought would make my professors happy. This is after I'm out of school, mind you. But thinking about my professors and all the things that they told me were good, thinking about my professors and all this art history we just went over, and what was important and what wasn't important, all that stuff was in my head. And I feel like I was making a lot of work for them. And I think the big breakthrough came when I just decided I was going to do a show and I was going to make work. And I was like, if all this work comes back, I can see where all these pieces are going to hang in my house. I don't care if anyone buys it or not. This would look great here. This would look great there. This would look great over here. And you know what's funny is, when I did a show where that was my motivation and I made work that I really thought I would just love looking at and living with, a surprising thing happened. A bunch of people came and bought the work before I had a chance to bring it home. Okay. And this happened, I would say, 10 years after I was out of graduate school. I hope, Grace, that you could figure it out a lot faster than it took me to figure it out. Okay. Yeah. Great question.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great question. Patrick, do we have any others there? Grace hit me with a good one there. I loved it.
None in the chat.
Okay.
Does anybody have a question that they'd like to unmute and ask? Ashley, I see you unmuted.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a graduate student at Edinburgh University in ceramics. Sorry, I really only had a little bit of time today and I wanted to work. And I was like, well, I'll just compromise and do both. I hope you don't think I'm rude.
I saw you going in and out, in and out. No, I'm just glad that you're here, period.
Okay. And I know I could have turned the video off, but sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I'm like not really in it if my video's off.
No, thank you. I'm glad I see your face. Yes. So you're in grad school right now. So perfect.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What's up?
So a couple of the things that you said, I really agreed with. For a long time, I took like 5 years off between undergraduate and graduate school. And in that time, I was a craft fair potter. Like I did a lot of like cups and mugs and feather pendants. And like, I definitely agree with the fact that like for a long time outside of school, like my work just was for the people, if that makes sense. Like there were things that I really liked to make and I really enjoyed. But then I would come up with an idea and really like it, and then it would somehow get catered or curated towards the audience that I was selling to in order to make money. And eventually it just got really tiresome and not fun for me anymore.
Really? So here's
I mean,
the question. So the process, because I know you enjoyed the process of making the stuff. Yes, like the actual
yes,
process
of
making
course.
stuff.
Yes.
But then you got weary of what kind of the emotion, the satisfaction, the kind of you know what I mean? Like the satisfaction wasn't there as far as
Well, I felt it was hard to experiment because there was a certain, like, you had to stick to your aesthetic. You had to, it had to be functional. It had to. So now being in graduate school, I really relate to the questions that you asked, because I decided I wasn't going to make functional, and people were like, okay, so what's your work about? And I was like, I don't know. It's functional before. It had purpose already built into the form. So this past year and a half, I spent a lot of time asking myself, like, why, and I've gotten down like what I want to make and why I like to make it somewhat. But I don't know who my audience is anymore. And I don't know how to go about finding that out, if that makes sense. Or like,
you know what you're honing in on what you really want to make.
Mm-hmm.
But now the next question is, how on earth do you find your tribe?
I think so, yeah. How do I tell these people are like, you're not making mugs? I'm like, too bad.
Okay. Well, so wait, there are two things I want to call you out on real quick. One of them is, it doesn't have to be a hard either or. I know that with this idea of branding of the artist, we're either Pablo Picasso doing whatever he wants, right? Or, we're making mugs because we know people are always going to buy some and we're going to make money from them. Here's the other question. So
go ahead.
you've got, if we were to think about, if we're talking about Toyota would sell their Lexus, and they would sell a really expensive Lexus, and then they would sell a Honda Civic, right? And okay, so here's the part as an artist, how do we traverse this? Because do you want to make things at different price points, different things for different contexts? But then if you feel like you're making things for the cheaper price point, do you feel like now the slippery slope is, do you feel like you're compromising the higher price point? Or do you think you're compromising how people view you? Like, these are the things that creep in for us, right? So I think that's the delicate thing, is like, can you make the functional stuff that people kind of liked, but can you find a way to cleverly fuse it with some of the things that you're really into right now? And that's the challenge I would have for you. So you're making the high-end stuff that you want to be in the Whitney, but then you're also kind of making the thing that, like, so there's an artist named Yoshitomo Nara. I don't know if you're familiar with him, a Japanese artist, but makes these very cutesy kind of psychological, these girls, these portraits of these girls. They're kind of cartoonish. I mean, so he has released product where there were like candy bowls, like a head that holds candy, little sculptures that you could buy for your house that were just cute and plushies, right? But then on the other end, like Pace Gallery New York sells his paintings. And I thought, I love looking at him, or we know Cause, with the X's over the eyes. He's someone who's very interesting, who owns the art world, a lot of it at the moment, because he's selling designer toys, but then he's having major shows at museums at the same time. But they kind of figured out that cheat code, right? Where a kid who really likes the toy can buy it, but then on the other end, there's the piece that's worth $200,000. But then
I have somewhat been trying to do that a little. It's hard in graduate school because they definitely like to label you. Like, are you a sculpture artist, or are you a functional artist? Or I think at least in ceramics. But so what I've been doing is building whatever. I do these macro botanical sculptures.
Wow.
And so I've been doing those, and then making like a mug or cup version, or like a set of those that reflects the larger piece, which I'm okay with. I like those a lot. And it's a fun way of coming back to my roots, which is functional pottery, and including some of those sculptural elements. And also not that I didn't like craft or pottery. It's nice that art is accessible. I feel like when you become working in larger pieces that are more expensive, doesn't feel like everybody can have it in their home. And I would prefer that.
Right.
That
And
if
I'm gonna tell you
somebody
something
really
right,
likes something, they can have a
I'll tell you
piece.
something
Sorry,
right
go
now. This
ahead.
is a very interesting conversation. I feel like you and I ourselves can go another 2 hours, you and I directly
Oh,
on this.
please go ahead.
I don't
Ask other
know if you're
questions.
I don't know if you're on Instagram or not. If you are, just look for me, Dustin Harewood, any of you all, because I'm gonna tell you right now, as far as finding your audience, my God, in this era of the hashtags, right? I have managed to, over these past few years through Instagram, find my people so much easier than I ever have before. And alternating posts between things that would be in the museum and little drawings or objects that might be more accessible, and using my Instagram page to bob and weave between those sorts of things to show that they're all kind of related in different ways. Got me? And interacting with my audience in that way. Please find me on there, because you and I will have a much longer talk here about all your grad school stuff. All right. Thank you for that question.
Oh,
That was
yeah. Thanks for the time. Thanks.
all right.
Dustin,
Yes.
we have two other questions in the chat function.
Yes.
I'm going to read them both to you, even though they're two separate questions. The first
Okay.
is from Clara. It says, so building on your answer to Grace's question, and as
Yes.
someone making the art they want to, do you have any ideas or thoughts about what direction to take or to think about in relation to determining creative ways about making people interested in one's work? The other question is from Jermaine, and he says, what about writers? I don't have a target audience. I want everyone to enjoy what I write.
That was Jermaine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait, Jermaine, I got to deal with you, Jermaine. Hold on. I'm going to come back to that other question, which was a great follow-up to what Grace's question was. Jermaine, let's talk about you, the writer. That's not true. What are you writing? What is your content? Where are you, Jermaine? Can you speak up in here? What's up, Jermaine? How are you
Yeah,
doing?
good. How are you? Number one, I didn't go to school for this. You know,
Okay, that's good. So you haven't been tainted by a whole bunch of people and all their thoughts. So that's all right. That's cool.
no.
What are you doing?
Actually, God woke me up out of my sleep and he told me to write a story about what happened to me as a child. And that's what I did. And now he's blessed me with other stories. So when you say a targeted audience,
Yes.
I don't really know what that means when it comes to writing.
So I have a question for you. So when you said writing about you as a child, yes, this is your experiences growing up. You kind of wrote something about that.
Yes. I wrote well, I've told everyone in the city, so I'll tell you guys, I was molested at 7 years old and I wrote a story about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is heavy. So we've got content there. That's heavy content.
Yeah.
And where are you from? Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up here. I wrote 3 stage plays about it.
Oh my God. Do you know how many people have shared your experience who have never had the courage to share it like you've shared, that you're sharing yours? How many people who feel like they were the only one that happened to, and that they freak out and think there's something wrong with them and they don't know how to deal with the trauma that they had as a child? Do you know how many people who would need you and to come and find you in that content? You know what I mean? That may be your core audience right there at the top. That's who we're dealing with. Now, as far as identifying them, that gets kind of tricky, right?
Yeah.
But then there are other levels, because then you've got these like subcultures, because you are a Black man. And then the idea is, so in the Black community, kind of how are these issues dealt with, right? Because the Black community, some Black communities still struggle with a lot of things with sexuality, homosexuality, molestation, the Black church. There's all of this stuff, right? In this big pot. So, hey, man, do you see all the stuff I'm calling out?
Yeah.
This is the core. Yeah. This right here, that's where you plant the seed and start watering that. That's the target. Now, that does not mean that after that, that is something that's universal, though. And no matter where you are in the world, we can tap into it. But I've just identified your specific context. And that's your community. And that's where I think we need to go on ahead and like really concentrate and then work our way out. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, very helpful.
And you're definitely not writing the next Star Wars, okay? All right.
No.
That doesn't sound anything like some Lord of the Rings stuff.
No.
So those may not be target audiences, right?
Okay, I got you. I got you. Thank
Yes,
you. Thank you. I
yes.
appreciate it.
No problem. And if you are on Instagram or somewhere else too, then follow me. And if you have like a follow-up or something, you could DM me there and we can go back and forth a little bit
Yes,
more.
definitely.
I apologize if there may be a delay just because I'm working like 2 or 3 jobs and trying to be a full-time artist and a teacher and do these things. But I would
Wow.
love to continue that with you too.
All right, absolutely. I appreciate you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you for that question there.
All right.
That was great. Yes. And let's walk our way back here. Patrick, who was it that asked how to make people care?
It was Clara.
Clara. Great question, Clara. Where are you, Clara?
I'm here.
You're here? Okay, look, we got that picture, Clara. Okay, you're not going to show your face.
Oh, we can
All right,
show me if you like.
Where are you, Clara? I want to see you.
I just don't know how to do it. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll look at this cool image here instead. That
Unless
image,
someone can send me a thing. Oh, there, I found it, I think. There I am.
hey, hi. Where are you? Oh, wait, okay.
That's my nice background because I miss it.
Okay, what is that background?
That's just my gallery shot that I had in my work because, yeah, we don't do that anymore now.
Is that your work?
Yeah.
Whoa, okay. Whoa. Are those oil paintings?
No, they're photos.
They're photographs.
Yeah.
Ah, and is that all? Is that? I'm sorry. We're going
They're
right over this art. Is this you? Okay.
Sorry, yeah, they're all self-portraits and they have to do with identity and, yeah.
They're self-portraits and it has to
They're
do with
self-portraits.
identity. So, okay, wait, yeah. Why are you taking so many pictures of yourself? Let's talk about this right now.
It was psychologically or for my work. No, I was I was doing a series. So I took a picture of myself every day for 52 weeks. I drew a picture on my bathroom mirror when I woke up, and then throughout the day interacted with different people or nature or whatever the case may have been. And then at the end of the day, I'd have a shower and then take a photo of myself with the steam. You could see the picture from the morning, and that was just my. It kind of touched on all those 4 areas that you did about like commemorating and at the same time looking at things in a different way and kind of touch on all of them.
Ah, so you are recording. Is this like evidence of your existence? Is you're kind of like, so wait, I have a question. What is your intent?
My
What is
intent
your intent behind
for
this
the work.
You're being slippery with me right now because I like that. I like how you gave me that general. It does fall under those 4. Why are you doing this?
I am
They
doing
look
this
great. They look great. Why are you doing them?
to have a connection with people, to carry on a conversation, to think for them to look at it and get something out of it. And what
do
I
you
want,
them to get out of that? What
I
kind of
want
conversation?
them to think about themselves, about where they're at, about the way things aren't static, about the way things change, and whether that's okay, whether they're okay with that, whether they want to dig their heels in and be that same person, or things along those lines.
Oh, here we go. We're getting it out of you here now.
Okay.
So, so this is about also with you and your personal journey and you kind of dealing with this idea of change. This idea of psychologically, because that can be about aging, that could be about being in a bad place and kind of working your way out of the bad places. This could be, or is it something as mundane as just kind of like, I don't know, I'm just here and I just want to like kind of record my existence on this plane? Which of those kind of is like hits closest home?
It's all of them, and I think
All of them.
yeah. So I'm like, that's what I'm saying. It kind of hits all the things because in doing that, I realized, oh, I am documenting myself and my life for that whole year, and that's kind of cool. But that wasn't the intent behind it.
Because the intent was
just to look at myself each day and determine how my relationships change me, whether I allowed them to change me, whether there was resistance, whether that's it. It was just basically that. Like,
I see. So about you, relationships to other people, and then how that has affected you.
right.
So there's a lot of psychology. So these are heavily psychological.
They are.
And it sounds like this is dealing a lot with the human condition.
It does.
And this is not like the human condition in an action movie where people are shooting at each other and we're watching someone save someone else, human condition,
Right.
but rather this kind of isolated individual kind of pinpointing you alone. This, okay. So now wow, I love this. You gave me a really tricky one here to deal with. How to make people then care about it then, right? Because it's so personal.
That's right.
So there's some big things going on because you are a woman, I think. Yes. Right. And you are, and this is also, I'm not going to ask your age, right?
Okay.
But, all right. But the thing is,
I'm not 20.
child, what's that?
I'm not 20.
Okay. Because there's a child probably would not be interested in this at all.
Right.
A really, really young adult might not be as interested. Someone who is more farther along in their adulthood, okay, who is really kind of doing a lot more self-reflection. We become more and more aware of ourselves as we get older. And it was fascinating is listening to you. That sounds like that awareness and kind of that awakening and more self-examination. Yeah.
Yeah.
Self-examination, that is a universal thing, right? But that's a thing that not everyone is as conscious of as others are. How do we package this and then communicate this idea of self-examination and challenging the audience as they walk up on your stuff, then turning the question back on them? Yes, and kind of like, do we present this in a way where it's kind of like asking the question then to the viewer? How do you react to this? Do you understand what I mean? There's a space there that we can start to play with. And maybe it might be through these conversations that maybe it emerges how people start to take interest in you because they're projecting themselves onto your images. I think that's what you want.
Yeah.
So it's not all just for you. It's
Right.
all in your house and you to look at yourself.
Right.
So what you want is other people to project themselves onto this face of yours.
Right.
There's the hook. Now, how do we then build a whole kind of cool scheme about how you, when you post them, when you write the statements, how do you then throw that challenge out to the audience? So it's meant to be something that you're like, I want to have a dialogue. Who's interested in this dialogue with me? I think that's the space where you start to get people to come and then kind of hook in and really start to understand what these are and get excited about them. That makes sense?
It does.
Now, that's not the only angle, but that's the quick angle in the past 10 minutes that I feel like I'm starting to figure out. If you are on Instagram or somewhere else, or Patrick will give you my email address, maybe we can think more about that.
Okay.
But that is very interesting work. But that is about psychology, and that is something that is shared. And the question is, Oprah got really famous because she allowed all of those traumas and past experiences. She wanted to have the dialogue, right? She put herself out there, interviewing people, but putting herself out there. And that connection that people had with her is what made her so successful. And that's the question I have for you, to challenge you to see if you can start making that connection. And maybe it's with the people in your immediate circle, but then how do you start stepping beyond it?
That's great. Thank you.
I hope that helped.
It did. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. That was a great one. All right, cool. And and Patrick, see, those were some great questions. So I know now that we're approaching the hour mark. I know that I don't want some people to get bored and start signing out because they're like, I only signed up for an hour. But is there anything else? Is there any other quick question or anything that anyone would like to ask or anything before we wrap this up? That was great. Thank you, Clara.
I do have one question for you. Did you mention that you're a teacher?
Yes. Wait, who is this? What's your name?
My name is Erica. I'm a graduate painter at Edinburgh.
Erica, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Erica. And you said yes, I teach.
I'm just curious, do you find that teaching adds to your practice or more or less just takes away from it? And I don't mean like physically the time you have in your studio, but like conceptually, do you think it helps you stay current, or do you think it just kind of takes away from your practice?
Great question, Erica. Oh my gosh. So That's a great question to end here with. Teaching. You know, this is a trap here. I don't know if we got any other teachers on the line, but Erica, let's talk about the practical part of teaching. The fact that students take a whole lot out of you sometimes, right? Like by the time you're done talking about stuff all day with other people, do you still have the energy to come back to the studio and make your own stuff? And I'll tell you, the real is, I have a lot of colleagues who are not that active with their studio practice, because when the checks are guaranteed to come in twice a month, and then you bought the house and you got the mortgage and all the bills, dare I say you have children, all right? By the time you leave school and that set of people and you come home and have another set of people, it is very hard to then stay on that edge, right? And to continue to push yourself conceptually. And then at the same time, being out there in the world, engaging with the community. That's a lot. That's a tall task.
Mhm.
I have somehow, Erica, been trying to, I feel like I have kind of sort of figured out how to get it all done, kind of sort of. Though I do feel like teaching has been amazing because I learn the most from untrained artists. I do not teach where, much like the Bob Ross setup, where, all right, everybody, this is what we're going to do. I'm not interested in making clones of myself. I'm not there doing a bunch of tutorials so that people are painting like I'm painting or whatever, right? It's like, this is what we're doing. And then I like to sit and watch them and then have conversations with them. And through that, I think with them, I think I've kind of learned more about myself by listening to them and seeing them at their beginning stage and seeing where I am at my stage. And that beginning stage kind of helps me at my stage, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that
Are
answers
you
my
thinking
question.
about teaching?
Yeah, I'm kind of caught between what I want to do. I'm just still trying to weave my way through it, but I still think that's what I want to do at this point. But the whole time constraint does worry me a little bit, but I also do want to have that interaction with either kids or even adults in the future.
So you would like to teach, but you'd also like to be an active artist out there in the
Yeah,
world,
I
selling
mean,
and producing.
yeah, I know that it's hard to do that. I'm not really worried about like really selling that much, but I still want to be like fulfilling my own needs with it because
Yes.
I just don't want to lose that part of myself to teach.
Okay. No, I love that. And I'll be honest with you, the teaching is very rewarding because I would say, honestly, I get more excited when one of my students wins or sells a piece or has a show or anything. I find at this point in my life, I actually feel it. I feel more, it's more gratifying watching them succeed than my own personal successes. Isn't that
Mhm.
something? So in a way, it's been so rewarding. Now, teaching in college is a little more cushy. If you're teaching elementary school and high school, that's rugged. And I can't do that, what they do. Those teachers are amazing. I have this cushier thing where I could just kind of like come and go and kind of make more of things the way I want them to be and how I do them and whatnot. But with that said, not worrying about selling, that is fine. But I'll tell you, that is an easy way out.
Mhm.
And I want you, just like the conversation I just had with Clara, this is all about intention. If you're making things, I think you want the things to go out into the world, if you're being honest with yourself. And I want
Yeah.
you to have that same question I asked earlier. How do you get people interested in that stuff? I still want you to sit with that too.
Mhm.
And not just kind of like, you know, I'm just going to make it and just,
Yeah.
right?
Well, ideally, I would love to sell all of my stuff, but I mean, at the end of the
Yes,
day,
there
if
you
it
go, the
doesn't,
truth.
it's decoration for myself, I guess.
Okay, so that's where we have to find the motive. That's where, how do you get people excited is the art project I have for you. About how do you get people excited about the things that you've made is the art project I have for you next. That is the challenge. Cool. Great questions too there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. I know at this point, there's some people who need to go on about their business and do their thing. And that's fine. You're not going to offend me if you want to sign off right now. But if there's one more question or anything else, Patrick, I will take one more, or we could wrap it up here. It's all up to you.
I have a question for you if nobody else does, which is, how important in your practice is it to be outside of your own bubble, in the sense, I know you go down to Wynwood every year for Basel and enjoy Miami, and you travel. So how important is it in your own personal practice to stay relevant with what's going on in the world of art outside of just what's occurring in your studio or in Jacksonville and in your proximate market? And what ways do you stay relevant?
Okay, that's a great question there, Patrick. And I think I'm gonna sum this up very quickly. I have an uncle who was like one of the first generation kind of like Pfizer scientists, and then he went on to have a second career where he went into academia. And it's funny because I sat and listened to him in family atmospheres complain about academia, because he felt like when he was at Pfizer, you see with the vaccine that just came out, right, folks? When he was working as a scientist, there was no choice to be on the edge, knowing what's going on right now, understanding how the field is changing, how concepts are changing, how to stay right there on the edge, how to constantly question what it is that you're doing, and how to push forward and understanding what's next. Yes? So if I show people like Pablo Picasso in the presentation and Warhol, they're celebrated so much, considered avant-garde, because they are in that same practice that I would say a Pfizer or Moderna scientist is right now. Yes, being very much aware of what's happening in 2021, and how does your work relate to what's happening now. The danger for us can all be, because as artists, I mean, I love being in isolation. Isolation was fantastic for me. Quarantine, I loved hanging out by myself, making work, and not having to talk to people. That was amazing, right? But there's a danger in kind of going into our own world. That's fine. But then the question is, so here's the thing, right? The greatest artists we know are the ones who represent the time that they are in. And the question is, I have for all of you, is how are you engaging with this time now? Are you aware of other people in your genre right now? And what are they making? Where are they making it? Do you care? Or is it just kind of, do you just want to kind of do your own thing in your studio and kind of be disconnected? You can do either or, and that's fine. But after listening to my uncle complain for so long about that stuff, I realized the idea that, okay, wait. So I'm gonna say all that and I'm gonna contradict myself here right now. There's one of the most famous British painters of all time was Lucian Freud, who did these amazing figurative paintings, but he was doing these amazing figurative paintings during a time when figurative painting was not popular. I think he was doing those figurative paintings mostly when more abstraction was taking over, abstract expressionism and minimalism and all of that sort of thing. I don't know. I would assume that Lucian Freud was very much aware of what was going on around him. But at the same time, he was very much true to his own interests. And I guess the question is, Patrick, can you do both? And does it have to be either or? Can you be very honest and sincere and true to yourself and deal with yourself and your interests and all the quirky things that make you unique, these gifts that you have for the world? But at the same time, can you do that and not get disconnected from everything and just live exclusively in that little old world of yours? Can you do both? I would suggest you do. Did that answer?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So get out there and look at stuff. And I think that's the other thing about the internet, because it's so easy to see what's going on everywhere right now. And all those galleries, most of those galleries up north are closed right now. You guys are up there, right? I mean, it's hard to kind of see stuff, but my God, the internet, guys, right? On Instagram, I am like overwhelmed with content right now. If I'm following certain artists, I can't even keep up. There's so much stuff to look at. And I love like waking up and kind of getting surprised by things that other artists are posting that I would be following, whether I know them or they're super, super famous people I don't know. Cool?
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. I want to thank you for your time this evening and sharing your insights and knowledge with us as part of our Pro Network series. As a reminder, Dustin is on Instagram. You can find him under the handle @Dustin Harewood. spelled Harewood for his last name. Again, thank you all for joining us on this Thursday evening. If you haven't done so, I would encourage you to visit the Pro Network webpage within Erie Arts and Culture's website. There we post resources such as this discussion, as well as opportunities for artists, whether they be residencies, fellowships, grants, public commissions, etc. And we try to update that at least once a week. And again, this session this evening was graciously sponsored by the National Endowments for the Arts. And with that, I'll bid you all farewell.
Can I say one last thing before you go?
Yeah, of course.
We are still mourning the loss of Patrick over here in Northeast Florida. You guys are very lucky to have that guy up there. Love to have this guy back over here. I'm still sad. All right, thank you. That's all I want to say. It's great to see you again, Patrick. Thank you for inviting me in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Y'all have a good evening.
All right, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.